すごいことになってんだよ。
あの曲つまんないんだよな。
Maybe not today.
軍に放送を止められる前に早く。
ということでしょうか、大総統夫人。
大総統夫人？
ええ、中央軍は私を殺そうとしたのです。
There it is. Get it out.
すると夫人に銃を向け射殺の意思を示したと。
そうです。
では閣下のいない時を見計らって中枢の誰かがクーデターを。
Rebecca.
それはわかりません。
ご子息がセントラルを離れていたのは
息子とも連絡が取れないのです。
なんですって。
嘘だろ。
かわいそう。
セリム坊ちゃん大丈夫かな。
気を確かにブラッドリー
クーデターだって。
本当にマスタング大佐に助けてもらわなければ私もどうなっていたことか。
Spread the
なるほ
name.
ど。マスタング大佐はクーデターを察知していたということですね。
マスタングか。
それでは助け出された時の状況を。
夫人にはまだお伝えしていなかったのですが、実は昨日東で大総統の乗った列車が
Oh.
何者かに爆破されました。閣下は行方不明になっているのです。
Yeah, she's gone.
しかし大総統閣下が行方不明とはどういうこと
He'll
なん
turn
でしょ
up.
う。
He'll turn up.
そこに大総統の列車爆破、さらに今回の夫人に対する発砲許可の件、これではっきりしました。上層部に閣下を排除しようとする一派がいると。
Interesting tactic.
そんなこと言われましても無理です。人質を取られていますし、我々も銃を突きつけられて
Never mind.
身動き一つ取れません。
Nice. Nice.
数が多すぎてどうにもなりませんって。
I love that.
撃たないで。許してお願いします。
Nicely done, my guy. It's all going a little too
バッチリです。
perfectly.
放送止めんな。
はい。
マスタング大佐に賛同する我々は微力ではありますが、大総統閣下の意志を継ぎ正義の名のもと卑劣な輩に全力で立ち向かう覚悟であります。
マスタングめ、ブラッドレイがいないのをいいことに大総統の意向を使いたい放題だね。しかも正義などと国民が食いついてくれるといいけどね。
正義なんて曖昧で浮ついた言葉、よく言うぜ。
いいのよ。みんな大好きなんだか
A bit of justice.
だな。先に言ったもん勝ちだ。ロイ・マスタングの言う通りだよ。わしらは
Schwallens.
東から来たばかりだが、あっちでは大総統の列車が爆破されたってえらい騒ぎだった。
国のトップが行方不明なのに
The word of
情
mouth.
報も出さないなんて。これでラジオキャピタルが襲撃されて夫人が死んだりしたら間違いなく上層部が黒だろう。セリモはどうした？セリモは
Celine.
殺されてなきゃいいけど。
何やら新しい仲間も増えているようだが。スカー。しかし懐かしい場所だな。
Yeah.
君の泣き顔が思い出される。またああいう素直な涙を見たいもの
あ
だ。
水分は大嫌いなんじゃないですか。無能になるから。
無駄話は後でしろ。戦え。
戦い。
貴様が命令するな。
了解。この白いのを倒せばいいのね。
ホムンクルス。
Death by fire.
自己修復をしていない。
Inferno. Fire kills all. He's gotta be Krillin. He's been missing for a few episodes now. Oh. There you go. Perfect timing. Oh wow, that's a lot of them against just one.
バカ者、なぜ国へ帰らなかった？
そういうの虫図が走るんだよ、
That
ね。
voice acting though.
鋼の錬金術師に炎の錬金術師。
Yeah, you
そ
prepare
れに
yourself.
スカ北でお世話になったクソキメラどもも一緒か。
確か変身できるホムンクルスだったな。
Oh, this goes all the way back
はじめまして、マスタング大
to
佐。
his friend
と、あれ
Hughes.
いいのかいすか。こいつイシュバールを地獄にした国家錬金術師だよ。
そうだな。
Yeah.
あんたら人間だって人の不幸とか愚か者が踊るのを見てるのが大好きなんじゃない？だからしょっちゅう戦争してるんじゃないの？
確かに愚か者が踊り狂っているのを見るのは愉快だ。特にホムンクルスとかいう愚か者が踊り狂う様を見るのは最高だ。
That should
貴様の質問には答えた。
not answer mine.
今度は私の質問に答えてもらおう。マース・ヒューズを殺したのは誰だ？答えろ、ホムンクルス。
Yeah.
マリア・ロスだよ。あんたが焼き殺した。
違う。彼女ではなかった。
じゃあ
Oh,
無実
wow.
の女生きたまま焼き殺したんだあんた。やるね、ひどいね。で家族にはどう説明したの？
Oh, the tone of this, but
貴様らホムンクルスにこの質問をするのもいい加減飽きてきた。さっさと事実だけを答えろ。
he knows, but he wants to hear it.
おめでとうマスタング大佐。やっとたどり着いたってわけだ。
Oh. Oh
貴
man.
様のようなバカにヒューズがやられるとは思えん。
こういう手に引っかかるヒューズみたいなやつのことを
Oh
言うんだよ。
no.
顔色が
Oh, I thought he knew for sure at this
い
point.
いね、その表情。ヒューズを殺した時も最高だった。
Don't do that.
愛する妻の顔したやつに撃ち殺される絶望。はあ、もう最高。
You're about to burn. You're about to burn.
決まりだ。まずその下の根から焼き尽くしてやろう。
誰が通っていいって言ったんだよ。お前らには北でのお礼をたっぷりしな。
この私の前で他のやつと喋っている余裕があるのか。
Wow.
ベラベラと回転のいいその下にはよほどの油が乗っていると見える。よく燃えるじゃないか。ヘンリー、行け、エドワード・エルリック。お前にはやるべきことがあるはずだ。
ほら行くぞ、エド。
ちょっと
Edo.
ホムンクルスなんぞひとひねりにしてくれるって。
そういう問題じゃねえんだよ。
え？何のこった？その美しい友情に敬意を表して本気で相手
Let's
して。
see. I'm not sure if it's about to be.
この体手加減が効かないからな。どうなっても知らない。
Not gonna let you finish.
眼球内の水分が沸騰する気分
Oh
は
my
どうだ。
god.
想像を絶する痛みだろ。
そうだ、そうだよ。
That's
こい
right.
つはラストを焼き殺した男だ。
Vengeance indeed.
注意はここで待っていろ。あれは私一人で片付ける。
Oh boy.
血管みたいだ。なんかさっきから胸焼けみたいな嫌な感じがするんだが。
でしょうね。この奥とてつもない気の塊がいます。
炎の錬金術師のことか。かつて復讐の炎に身を焼かれ自分を見失った俺にはよくわかる。あの男、あのままでは憎しみの炎で己の心をも焼き尽くすだろう。
Look at this.
ここだ、エンビー。
Wow, look at this.
出てこなければ
Homunculus
さらに大
running.
爆発をぶちかますぞ。
ようロイ
Oh, wow.
人間混乱してるわ
Wow, yes, look at this animation.
ヒューズは死んだ。もういない。貴様の行為は火に油を注ぐだけだ。
Yeah, you're only making him more angry. So, wow, Sakuga. Look at his perspective.
あいにくピンポイントで狙える私の技を見くびるな
This is an execution. It's
大佐命令に背きます
she's gonna grab her. Oh.
「命令違反だぞ注意見失ったここはまるで迷路だ私のそばを離れるなよ注意
No! Don't do that! Oh. Okay, so yeah, that cliffhanger is just devastating. Devastating. I was legitimately just annoyed at that point. Because it was so abrupt as well, wasn't it? And at such a crucial moment. I mean, I suppose that's the whole point of a cliffhanger, isn't it? But listen, you know, part of me did think about potentially recording the next episode, but the logistics didn't really quite check out. So I'll have to be patient. And then I'll, you know, come back to this episode the next time I get to record this anime. That is just, oh my goodness, that is some cliffhanger, isn't it? Now, let's kind of assess the situation and kind of try to figure out who's who in this situation. My first thought on the matter is that I was really quite suspicious of Mustang in this case. I wasn't convinced that this is Mustang. I was more convinced that this is actually Hawkeye. And the point that Hawkeye is pointing a gun at Mustang, I think that's perhaps a pretty solid sign that indeed that is the real Hawkeye, because Envy doesn't replicate those types of items, right? It's not able to, or they are not able to recreate a gun. I mean, unless, of course, he knocked out Hawkeye, put her to a corner, and took the gun. But ultimately, it just doesn't feel like Envy is going to be pointing a gun at Mustang. If Envy is able to get a jump on Mustang, that type of jump, you know, that's it. He's going to try to take out Mustang, right? So as of this point, I believe Hawkeye is the real Hawkeye there and is able to somehow clock. Maybe this Mustang failed some kind of test or failed some kind of telltale sign that Hawkeye is looking for in that moment, right? So for that reason, she has reason to believe this is Envy as Mustang. I mean, you know, there's that moment that she has a smirk on her face. It could be a few different things, you know, a bit of a misdirect, but it also could be Hawkeye legitimately thinking, okay, I've got them. That's Envy for sure. Listen, these two people, you know, Mustang and Hawkeye, they know each other. They know everything about each other. So I think Hawkeye is going to be able to recognize if that is the real Mustang or not. And I think she's clocked it. But yeah, she couldn't just remain on the sidelines, could she? Because much like Ed and Scar, I'll get into that in a bit, but much like those two, she had reason to be concerned about this situation because, to me, it looked amazing. You know, of course, it looked amazing. The Sakuga, the way it's drawn, the way Mustang is drawn, and even that in itself is really quite telling of his state of mind in these moments. I mean, it's really quite the contrast from the last time Mustang and Hawkeye are in that position, in that place, specifically in that room, right? Last time, his approach is really quite calm, collected, composed in motion, right? He's killing lust as a soldier, right? And he's doing it as quickly as possible to protect these people, right? To protect Hawkeye. And of course, Al is there as well. But here it's really quite different, isn't it? Because you can just feel the tension. It's just boiling over, isn't it? You know, there's a distinct feeling of Roy Mustang being the most dangerous individual in that room. That includes Envy as well. You see, yeah, I think it's fair to say that you do see some of that duality. You see some of that dark side that does exist within Roy Mustang. Though, of course, that's not specific just to Roy Mustang. Everyone does have a bit of that dark side, right? It's human nature. But, you know, they kind of touch up on this duality of Roy Mustang really, really long time ago. A really long time ago. Earlier on in the anime. I do remember discussing that in one of those post-episode portions early on in the anime. So it's interesting to see it kind of surface again here at this phase of the anime. But here it's a different story. It's a different story because his emotions have taken the driver's seat. His burning rage, right? His lust for vengeance at this point, that I must have my vengeance. That's how he must feel in this moment. That's how it really feels like in this moment. This is not a quick death. This is not him trying to get it over with. This is him legitimately wanting to torture and inflict as much pain as possible. I mean, he wants Envy to suffer as much as possible over and over. You really get to see the scary and devastating side of Roy Mustang in the flame alchemy that's on display. This is an individual that is capable of this type of hatred. He is capable of letting this type of hatred control him. He is an individual that is capable of this type of wrath. You know, clearly that's by design to show us Roy Mustang in this state, given the fact that he himself is trying to replace Wrath, right? King Bradley. I mean, you know, flame alchemy is just insane. It almost kind of feels like it's OP. It's one of the most scariest of the entire story, right? And you see for that reason that Hawkeye, or Riza Hawkeye's late father, and you know Mustang's sensei, mentor, was so reluctant about sharing, you know, the flame alchemy, the secrets of the flame alchemy, perhaps, because this is how devastating it can be. You see that Ed is really quite concerned, even before any of this kind of happens, and Mustang kind of starts going down that slippery slope and starts losing control. He saw just how effective his alchemy was in taking out the puppet soldiers, right? Though, of course, there's a few things that kind of play into that scene, right? Of course, you know, he's upset about the souls that are inside of these puppet soldiers. That's a part of it for sure. But then also you see there's this look of concern, right? There was almost this audible reaction that just kind of comes out of his mouth, right? After seeing this. And, you know, he's got this immense level of control as well. You know, there's this shot that's from above that's showing his alchemy, his flame alchemy, just doing the rounds, right? Taking out all the puppet soldiers and leaving everyone else safe. I mean, as Scar so eloquently stated, he's going to burn up his own heart in the flames of hatred, right? He sees it. You know, the fact that someone like Scar, who's been down that path, a path that he felt like was his only path, right? He was seeing red, tunnel vision. That's all he had. He could not even think of any other possibilities for the rest of his life. This is the path I cannot deviate from. And I'm speaking of Scar, right? But he recovered. But, you know, it's quite damning that he here believes that, yeah, you know, he's seen that look. I've seen that face. I've seen that look. I've just seen it all, right? Being there myself. I mean, if Scar is saying that this man is going down a path that is really quite dark, that he is seeing red, then you know it's true. You know it's accurate. And then, of course, Ed also picks up on this, right? He's really quite concerned about this. So I could totally see Ed kind of coming back into this scenario, perhaps running back or rushing back into it. But, you know, if Ed comes back into this, then the dynamic becomes even more explosive, doesn't it? Because, you know, like I mentioned, this is a man that is going to have his vengeance, right? Roy Mustang, that is. So it becomes really fascinating once other people start coming into the situation, right? Because is he just going to listen and give it all up, right? I don't know. And of course, that's one of the reasons this specific cliffhanger really stings. It really stings because I really want to see how this plays out. And listen, of course, I cannot brush over the fact that all of this is kind of being triggered by him finding out that Envy is the one who is responsible for the death of his friend, right? Maze Hughes. It's been this thing that's been looming above him for the longest time, this mystery. Now, I kind of just assumed he must know that this is how Maria Ross was framed. But no, you see the change in expression. And then I was like, oh. And at that moment, I realized he didn't know. He doesn't know. That's around the time shit got real. And it really started to feel like things are about to explode. You know, that Roy Mustang is about to explode. And essentially that is how it kind of plays out, doesn't it? So of course, you know, from one angle, his hatred, his anger, you know, it's justified perhaps. Especially because Envy is just digging in, you know, digging his own grave essentially. And that moment he decides to transform into Gracia, you know, that was it. And then you see something happen. You see the change in Roy Mustang's demeanor. You see the change in the eyes. You see the raw hatred in his eyes. And I thought it was beautifully detailed, right? Even if it was concerning and scary to see Roy Mustang like this. And ultimately, the reason it is concerning is that he is still capable of this type of you know, tunnel vision. He is capable of this type of hatred and seeing red and kind of losing control or letting his emotions do the driving rather than a level-headed approach, rather than taking a different approach, right? So for a man that is trying to take that position from King Bradley, right, and try to kind of take this country into a different direction, it's concerning. But the fact that it is being explored at this stage of the story, in the final phase of the story, that's fascinating. It is. And perhaps that could be one of the reasons he does ask Hawkeye to stay out there, because he knows that he's seeing red at the moment and he is going to have his vengeance. Because even if I do believe that is Hawkeye pointing a gun at fake Mustang, an imitation of Mustang, the imagery itself is really quite striking, isn't it? Because they've alluded to this, or they've actually set this up a long time ago as well, right? Mustang making the request of Hawkeye. I think it was brought up twice. You know, at one point she brings it up with Ed, right? In the big Ishwal flashback episode, the backstory episode, right? The talk at her dinner table, her and Ed. And, you know, Mustang telling her how if she feels he's straying from that path or he's deviating from the path that they've set for themselves, the goals they've set for themselves, shoot me. You know, you shoot me. It was something like that. It feels like it was a long time ago. But I feel like even the imagery itself is really quite deliberate there, even if it isn't the actual Mustang, right? But the thing is, it actually could be her pointing the gun at the actual Mustang in the next episode, maybe, depending on how this plays out and if Mustang is still really seeing red. And, you know, I keep mentioning the immense nature of his flame alchemy because imagine someone like him kind of losing control of his emotions and having that at his fingertips. There's a lot of room here for an accident, right? If he's seeing red and if he's not seeing straight, if he's not thinking straight, there's room here for friendly fire even, right? So it's concerning, of course. It's concerning. And listen, this might sound really strange to some, and maybe some might actually understand, but I actually had a lot of pity for Envy in this episode, right? It kind of goes back to that notion of these sins actually really being quite pitiful from our perspective as the audience. More often than not, I feel pity for the sins. I do. You know, pride is maybe the only sin that I've just been able to kind of really enjoy hating, maybe, right? Even though I still enjoy Pride as a character because it's a fantastic character. But you know, there was that moment inside of that dome, a bit of introspection, a bit of insight into the thoughts of Pride over the decades and the things Pride experienced, right? In the care of the lovely Mrs. Bradley. And I do think this is by design, that Arakawa has made it so you do feel pity for these sins. I mean, you see that Envy tries all of the usual tactics, right? Trying to pit the humans against each other. None of that is efficient. None of that is effective anymore. And then you see how frustrated he gets and how desperate he starts to get. And yes, I know people might remind me of the things they've done, right? The things they've kind of put into motion and instigated in the past. But I don't know, man. I do have pity. This is my honest take on it. I felt pity throughout that episode. And I'm sure many of you must have felt the same thing. Though I'm not saying that everyone should be feeling pity in that moment. I'm sure for many, this was actually a cathartic moment to see Roy Mustang dish out a bit of vengeance. I don't know, man. Ultimately, it didn't feel like this incredible moment. It actually felt really quite dark. You could feel that it's a slippery slope. You could feel Roy Mustang losing control. And I don't know, as he's dishing it out, it was more so concern rather than me being excited for it, right? I'm sure many of you can relate to that. And the thing is, us, the audience, is able to feel the same thing people like Scar, people like Ed, and people like Hawkeye are feeling in that moment, right? So I think it's deliberate. I do think it's by design. And then speaking of Mrs. Bradley, you see that indeed she was a crucial component, that she was going to be used to kind of bring a lot of the greater public, you know, on their side. And you see that it's really quite effective. She is quite the asset, but you know, in that sense, I still feel bad for her, you know, that she, maybe, you know, it's for the greater good, but she's still kind of being utilized as a tool, right? An asset. And you know, the approach is really quite the interesting approach. The tactic is quite the interesting tactic, and the politicking aspect of it is really quite fascinating as well to see. And you see some of the Mustang crew handles this, the radio station and all of that, the broadcast. I really enjoyed that segment, and how the Schwallens also play a part in kind of spreading all of this. And once it begins to spread, that word of mouth, it's like a forest fire, right? So it's having its desired effect for sure. And I love how they're actually using Pride, or Celine Bradley, the container, as a sympathetic person, or a sympathetic notion, right? They're still using King Bradley as the rightful Fuhrer, but he's the one who's being wronged here, right? Because now they're establishing the higher ups from Central Command are trying to take him out. And then, of course, finally, some stunning Sakuga on display, of course. The animation is just jaw-dropping. Jaw-dropping. The detail in the expressions, the detail in Roy Mustang's eyes. And, you know, at one point, it even looks like, you know, his eyes are in shadows, and it's almost like an X, isn't it? Really similar to Scar, isn't it? I mean, it's stunning in its presentation. It really is. And, you know, I'm excited that I might get to see much more of this here in the final phase of the anime, the Sakuga. The thing is, that's actually become one of the more exciting things about anime for me, you know, seeing the difference, seeing the Sakuga kick in, right? Because, of course, you cannot maintain that standard for an entire episode. But once it kicks in, once you clock it, once you see it on display, it's a treat. It's stunning, isn't it? And I'm sure I'll get more of it in these final few episodes. But yeah, I think that does it for now, folks. If you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you're interested in early access to the next few episodes right now, or perhaps even timer-based full length, consider checking out the Patreon page and potentially supporting the channel. If you're interested, the links are in the description and the pinned comment. Also links to social media, things like Twitter, Instagram, if that's your thing. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. And I do hope to see you again soon for episode 54. Until then, take it easy.